Now, this is a family service, so if any of the children and their parents would like to come sit up in this front part, you're very welcome to do so. And Jyotish is going to share some stories about Master's life.
Okay, we've got some brave ones. I'm going to tell 2 stories about Master when he was young.
But you have to come in the middle because you can't see.
Yeah, I can't see you. That's better. Okay, the first story took place when Master was about 6 years old. And he and his brothers and sisters used to go next door. They had a neighbor next door who was very loving and loved to have the children come. And so they would go and play. And they called this lady Auntie. That's one of the things they do in India where they have close friends. They call them uncle or auntie. So they called this lady Auntie. And she would give from time to time, she would give the little children different things to play with. But one day she gave Master, whose name at the time was Mukunda, she gave him a very special little present. It was a little goldfish, and he'd never seen one before. So he took it home, and they had a kind of a big tank, or a cistern it's called, and it's like a big cement tank. And in that was water that they used in the house for washing the floors and washing things and so on, not for drinking, but for things to work with the house. And so Master put the little goldfish in there. And every day, he and his sisters especially, but the children in the family, but especially little Mukunda, as soon as he woke up, he would run down and see how his goldfish was. And he just loved watching the little goldfish play in this tank. But one day, he went down, and the goldfish wasn't there. And he looked around, and the goldfish was on the floor. And one of the servants had been scooping up some water and didn't notice that they scooped the goldfish up in the water and threw it on the floor in order to wash the floor. And the goldfish died from being dropped on the floor like that. And Master was so sad. Master was he had a great love for everything in life. Later on, this wasn't part of this story, but later on, when Swami was with him, they were moving some plants. Master said, "Be careful. Can't you feel it's alive?" Even the plants he could feel like that. But so when he saw the goldfish had died, he was very, very sad. And he started crying. And he cried all morning long. And he wouldn't eat. He wouldn't come down from his little room. He just was very, very sad. And finally in the afternoon, his sister went up and said, "Please come down." And he said, "I don't want to." And his sister said, "Well, you're hurting Mom. You're hurting Mother." He said, "How am I hurting Mother?" And his sister said, "Well, if you won't eat, she won't eat either. And she's getting hungry." And so when he realized that what he was doing was affecting his mother, he said, "All right, I'll come down." And so his sister picked him up. She was older. But in one hand, he had something. He had his little fist clenched. And she said, "What do you have?" And he said, "I don't want to show you." She said, "Come on, show me." So finally, he opened up his hand, and he had a little pencil, and he had a little notebook. And in that notebook, he wrote the first poem he ever wrote. Later on, he wrote lots of poems, but this was the first one, and he wrote it in English, and it was, "My Red Fish Die." That was his first poem. Now, the next story is more about his real spiritual power, that even when he was young, he had great, great spiritual power. And at the time of this story, he was about 13 years old. So he's just a little older, about a half a year older than Rachel. So that'll give you an idea of how old he was. So they were living in a different city or town, and his father got word that his father worked for the railroads, and his father got word that they were supposed to move to Calcutta, and they were supposed to be there within 1 week. And it was a big thing to pack up the household and get ready and move all in 1 week. But the worst thing was there was a hurricane, or what they call a cyclone, in India. There was a hurricane near there, and it was raining and raining and raining, and the streets were flooded, everything was flooded, and they didn't know how they were going to get to Calcutta. They didn't know how they could travel. And so there was a lot of just kind of commotion in the house. And Master, who was 13, said, "Why are you all so afraid? I'll stop the rain." And they thought he was a little bit crazy. How do you stop a hurricane? So he went down, and outside the house, the whole courtyard was flooded. And he said, "Bring me some paper." And so his brothers and sisters brought him some paper. And he said, "I need more." And so they brought him a whole stack of newspapers. And he started folding up little paper boats. And then he would float them in the water right outside the door that was in the courtyard. And as he would do that, he would say some mantra or prayer. And they couldn't quite hear what he was saying. He was saying it softly. But he floated that boat, and then he folded another one, and he floated that with a prayer. Did another one, floated that. Well, he continued doing that for a whole hour. That's a long time to be folding up boats and floating them out, but with a lot of intensity. And then this rain stopped, and the skies cleared, and there was blue sky, and the hurricane stopped. And then the waters went down, and they were able to travel to Calcutta, which is where they lived for many, many years, where they had a house that a lot of us have visited. But on the way, they went by ship, and Master asked his brother, he said, "How do you like to travel best?" His brother said, "Not on ship. I don't like ships. I like trains better," because they'd traveled a lot on trains. And Mukunda, or Yogananda, said, "I like ships. I'm going to travel to faraway lands on ships when I grow up." And he did. He came to America. So those are two stories about Yogananda when he was young. There are lots and lots of good ones. So if the children want to leave, they can.
We'll see you back for the blessing.
Yeah.
Well, you got to admit they're as cute as they come.
Okay, we will start with the first reading of the year, which is At the Heart of Silence, the Eternal Word. I'm reading from Rays of the One Light, which are parallel passages of the Bible and Bhagavad Gita. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, these immortal lines appear. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Human vision beholds individuality and separation everywhere. Divine vision beholds the oneness of cosmic vibration, of which all things, no matter how diverse, are manifestations. Cosmic sound, the Word of God, and cosmic light, these are eternal. The world, as revealed to our senses, is illusory. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda relates an early experience he received of the divine aspect of reality. Sitting on my bed one morning, I fell into a deep reverie. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes? This probing thought came powerfully into my mind. An immense flash of light at once manifested to my inward gaze. Divine shapes of saints sitting in meditation posture in mountain caves, formed like miniature cinema pictures on a large screen of radiance within my forehead. "Who are you?" I spoke aloud. "We are the Himalayan yogis." The celestial response is difficult to describe. My heart was thrilled. I longed to go to the Himalayas and become like you. The vision vanished, but the silvery beams expanded in ever-widening circles to infinity. What is this wondrous glow? I am Ishwara. I am light. The voice was as murmuring clouds. I want to be one with thee. Out of the slow dwindling of my divine ecstasy, I salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. Wise are we if we meditate on that experience of Yogananda's and salvage from it even a breath of his inspiration. For quite simply, there is nothing else. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 7th chapter, I make and unmake this universe. Apart from me, nothing exists, O Arjuna. All things, like beads of a necklace, are strung together on the thread of my consciousness and are sustained by me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
I'd like to start by reading from Whispers from Eternity by Yogananda ji. This one is, I pour out my love at thy feet of immortality. I plucked blossoms of light from dawn's heart as offerings to thee. I have lighted lamps of wakefulness in the temple of my morning silence. I beheld thy bliss face emerge from the dark shadows of my ignorance, where it had been hidden for long eons by my indifference. And seeing thy smiling joy, I know that my own happiness mirrored thy blessed image. My heart's tiny capacity for love mirrored thy infinite love. My little peace of mind mirrored thy awe-inspiring, majestic calmness. I will blame the fates no longer for any suffering that comes my way. Beloved Guru, it was my self-made darkness that hid the glory of our mutual love. Now I see myself reflected in thy bliss, and know that I too am perfect bliss. For my own mirror is clear now. I behold thy reflection in it, O thou ever-present, omnipresent, perfect bliss. I pour libations of my love at thy feet of immortality. I pour out my heart to thee from the overflowing chalice of my soul. I wash with the precious musk of my reverence thy feet of ever-moving progress in everything. Well, good morning, everyone. We have two wonderful themes to weave together this morning. The one from the Ray's reading, The Eternal Now. And then, of course, we are celebrating Yogananda's birthday. He was born on January 5th, tomorrow, but we'll focus our Sunday service on it as well. Now, in this reading, The Eternal Now, it's a wonderful way to help us understand what God is and how we can relate to him. Because the way it's described is, as we sing in the beautiful song, The Thunder of Om, out of the silence came the song of creation. Out of the darkness came the light. And so the way the scriptures of India, to my understanding, give the most acceptable presentation of what God's consciousness is, how we can understand it, not form, not dogma, not rituals and beliefs, not belonging to a church merely, but a consciousness that moved from the center of stillness, from the center of silence, and moved forward and created a vibration. And that vibration was created so that we could relate to it. If it was only the unmanifested stillness and darkness, there would be no way we could enter in. But what is vibration? It's movement in opposite directions, repetitively, moving past a center there, whether it's sound, whether it's light. And so God, it says in the Bible, God moved the waters and one could feel his presence. He created that cosmic sound, Om, which is the reminder of his presence in all of creation. That vibration that runs, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, like a thread through the beads of all manifestation, through our own hearts. Now, this is satisfying on a certain level because it helps us understand how this manifestation exists by the vibration, the movement up and down from the calm, majestic stillness of God. And by moving the consciousness, it's a thrilling thought, really. Everything we know, everything we see, everything we touch and taste and feel has been manifested simply from that vibration, the waves moving up and down, but always touching that center of stillness, of calmness, of silence. But that wasn't enough for us to really find our way back to the stillness. So, as the soul evolves, there is a yearning to get back to that stillness. And the agency that God has created is the vehicle of the Guru. The Guru, as Master says in another poem, the spoken voice of silent God. That personal, creative, dynamic force which comes into this world when seekers are reaching out to find the reality that is too subtle to perceive with the mind and the senses. And the Guru comes to work with everyone individually, whoever seeks him, whoever seeks truth. The Guru is there to show the way out. I had a very interesting dream that still is with me very dynamically. I had this recently, a month ago or so. And the first part of the dream was more like a memory. It's what really had happened. It was the first year I was at Ananda. It was the summer of 1969. I was very new to all this, didn't have a deep connection with yoga or meditation or with Master or with Swamiji. But I was interested. And so I came the summer of 1969, and this was in the dream. There I was, as I was then, living up at the meditation retreat, as I was then. And in real time, in the past, my brother, who was not quite sure, I have one older brother, what his younger sister had gotten into. So he came out to spend several weeks here to check it out. So that was all in the dream. But then it diverged from what had actually happened. And in the dream, my brother said to me, "It's time to go now. We're not going to stay here." And I kind of liked it, but he was so strong in what he was saying. He said, "Come on, pack up all your things. I have a ride. We're leaving." And I said, "Okay." I didn't have enough willpower or focus to resist it. And I saw Swamiji, but there wasn't a connection. And he said, "Okay, goodbye." And I got in the car and I was driving away, and I felt sad, but I drove away. And then I woke up and I thought, I felt great sadness. And I thought, but it was such a powerful dream. And I thought, what was that dream about? It was strange. And I realized what was different about that dream than what had been my experience as a very new person coming to a spiritual place like Ananda was in the dream, I didn't feel Master's presence. But in real life, I realized I had, but I didn't recognize it at the time. I didn't know it was there. It's sort of like if you're printing something on your printer and one of the ink colors on a color printer, one of the ink colors isn't working, it's still the image, but there's something missing. There's a shade that wasn't there. And this dream and this understanding thrilled me because I realized, even though I didn't feel like I was a disciple of Master when I first came. I sort of got through Autobiography of a Yogi. I was inspired by Swami's teaching, but I didn't embrace it as my own. But I realized Master helped, by his absence in the dream, he helped me to experience and appreciate his presence in my life, because I knew it had always been there. And I knew if it had been up to me, I would have left with my brother. There was nothing holding me. And he's sort of coming back to this path. We'll see what comes of it. But it was a thrilling thought that the Guru, even though we don't recognize that presence in our life, silently, humbly, invisibly, guiding us forward, not letting us make the wrong decisions. And I thought about it, and I thought about my life, and I thought, what would have happened if I would have left? My life would have been as colorless as it was in that dream. It would have been without the vibrancy and the dynamic presence of that higher power that was guiding it. I don't share this dream with you to say, oh, she's different, she's special. I share it with you because it's true for all of us. We have to reach out and say, how is it that I even am able to meditate? How is it that I even want to meditate? How is it that I even think about wanting to meditate? It's not by our own efforts. It's by the grace. It says in Master's poem Samadhi, by deeper, longer, thirsty, Guru-given meditation. We need to appreciate, and not with a sense of, oh, I'm such a nothing and this great Guru has helped me, but with the sense that it's a partnership. And whether we realize it or not, that benevolent voice, spoken voice of silent God is always there, guiding us forward, keeping us from going in the wrong direction, protecting us. I read a wonderful story about from Babaji, for those of you who are new to our path, the first of our line of gurus. And at this is from Conversations from Yogananda. And at this time, Babaji was living in Benares. We always hear of him as the great Himalayan yogi, but he was living in a house in Benares. And interestingly, because our gurus have always been pivotal in changing the consciousness and the spiritual evolution of the planet, he had a servant, a manservant, Babaji, living in a house in Benares. And at that time, the man who was to become Shankara, who was the founder of the monastic order in India. This was hundreds of years ago. He was not yet on the spiritual path. He was simply an astrologer. And this servant of Babaji wanted to get an astrological reading. So he went to Shankar, who was to become Shankaracharya, and had his chart cast. He was a very good astrologer. And Shankaracharya said to the servant, I hate to give you this news, but prepare yourself. Tonight you will die. And the man was terrified, and he went running back to Babaji, and he told him, he said, go tell Shankara that you will live. And he didn't know what was going on here, so he ran back to the astrologer, and he said, my guru says that I will live. I won't die tonight. And Shankar looked at the chart, and he said, if you survive the night, I will become a disciple of your guru, because according to your chart, there's no way you can live. And that night, a terrible storm came up, and it was pouring rain, and lightning was striking all around the house that Babaji and his servant were in. Babaji said, lay down on the floor. He laid down on top of the servant, totally protecting him with his body. And those lightning was striking all around them. This man was unharmed. And in the morning, the man went to Shankara, and he said, only a man of tremendous soul, of tremendous spiritual power could have protected you from your ordained fate. And he went to Babaji and became his disciple. He initiated him as a renunciate, and then he went on to start the Swami order in India. But incredible. And we live in a time where things are not very stable. Things are not very predictable. Things are filled with anxiety and fear, politically, economically, as far as health, disease spreading throughout the planet. And yet, we have to understand that just as Master, as a 13-year-old, stopped the cyclone, as Babaji protected with his own body his servant, that we live in discipleship with this grace all around us, all the time. And whenever our mind starts wandering off, we have to just bring it back and say, I live without fear. I live in your grace. I live by the power of your love, and that's all that sustains me. You know, at Ananda, one of our wonderful blessings has been, we've been through so many tests and trials. Everything was taken away. The community burnt to the ground, and we lived in teepees, we lived in tents, we lived without running water, without electricity, without plumbing, without anything. And yet, it always was okay. It always was okay. Because of that, I appreciate it more and more as time goes on, that grace that surrounds the disciple from the guru. But more than just protection, there's, of course, the teachings, the path that shows us, Master says in that beautiful poem, I come to tell you all of him, and to show you the way which draws his grace, the techniques that he has given us, the Kriya Yoga, the most powerful tool for liberation through self-effort ever given to mankind. Work with it, work with it. I've been practicing Kriya Yoga it's getting to be more than 30 years, and I feel like I'm learning all the time. Never be complacent and never be discouraged. Keep working with it. Just the successful soul, the one who achieves their goals, is the one who never gives up. No matter how, Master said, I may be broken and bloodied, but unbowed. And very often I felt that way. I am broken and bloody, but I am not yet on my knees, and I'm going to keep moving forward. And so the teachings and the attitudes of discipleship, for those of you who are joining our community, who are new members, if there's one bit of advice I would give to you, and with the most deepest sincerity I can, give up self-will. Give up, I know what's right. I know what to do. This is what I need. This is what's important. This is my life. It's not your life. And the more you realize that, the more you will experience that grace in your life. Just surrender to that beautiful grace that's all around you. It's the hardest thing in the world. There's no question about it. But it's the only thing that will get you what you want. Everything else is just a detour. So for those of us, I speak for many of us who have been here over the years, who have fought many inward and outward battles. If you can just keep surrendering to the Guru and say, Master, it's all, I give it all, I lay it all at your feet. I remember once, many, many years ago, probably 33, 34 years ago, something had happened with Swamiji. And Swamiji, understand, we don't revere him as the Guru, but we revere him as a disciple, a lifelong disciple, and a channel for Master. But he had done something. He had set up this set of circumstances that was deeply hurtful and deeply painful to me. And I was so hurt and angry and confused, and I just did not understand why he had done those things and set up these circumstances. And then he called me over to his house, and I was crying and crying. I didn't want to go, but I went, and I looked at him, and in that moment, the only thing I could do was just, I looked at, he had been walking outside, and his shoes were dusty, and I just fell down, and I just took the dust off his shoes. And it wasn't like something I did mentally or planned out that I was going to do it as an act of humility. It was simply that he had broken some very strong attachment that I had had in the only way that it could have been broken, and yet it was very painful. But some part of me that was wiser than my mind or my ideas of what discipleship was supposed to be about, I knew that this was what it was, that this is how the Guru works with us. And I simply took the dust off his shoes. And he knew what had happened. And so many stories of how the Guru works with us in the darkest hours, in the most beautiful moments, smiling at us through all of it. But more than the teachings, more than the tests, more than the protection, is the inner transformation that comes about through the consciousness of the Guru. That's why they come into this world, not to build buildings, not to create organizations, not to write books, any of those things. They come for the inner transformation. I was reading an article recently about a person who was a very transformative person in other people's lives. And they said, and the image was very vivid in my mind, they said, I remembered from chemistry class, which was always a challenge for me, but 2 or 3 things stayed in my mind from that. And one was a supersaturated solution. And if you put a catalyst in it, just one little drop, then that whole solution is transformed by that catalyst. And I thought, that's like the Guru. If you put a catalyst in water, nothing happens. But the supersaturated solution is our consciousness that is just through our sincere devotion and practices and service and trying to find the right attitude in all circumstances, our consciousness becomes supercharged, supersaturated. And then you introduce the consciousness of the Guru, and this process begins. This chain reaction begins. And it's not automatic. We have to do the work supercharge our consciousness. But then when it's like that, just a touch, that's all it takes. Someone was asking me recently, well, Yogananda's not in the body. What does that leave me? It doesn't matter in the least. There's that wonderful story about a man who true story of a man who became a disciple of Yogananda after he had passed away. And he read autobiography of a yogi and felt like Yogananda was his guru, but wanted a living guru. And he was Austrian, I believe. And at that time, there was a saint traveling around in Europe giving satsangs and darshan. And so this man who became a disciple of Master later in life, he went to this saint and he said, I want to be your disciple. And the man said, without knowing anything about him, looked at him and he said, I'm not your guru. Yogananda is your guru. And he said, but Yogananda's dead. And the saint looked at him and he said, no, you are dead. Yogananda is alive. So that consciousness doesn't need to be confined by a body. That consciousness is there if we reach out, try our best to find that attunement and to understand that that relationship, it is the eternal now. That vibration, that particular ray of grace that Yogananda brought to this world and our line of gurus, it's always there. It has always been there. When I look back into this lifetime to very early memories, even when after that dream I began thinking, think about your life. Think about times when you didn't feel Yogananda's presence. And it was always because I had turned away, not because he wasn't there. And so that presence can be, that vibration, the spoken voice of silent God is there for those who listen, who work with all that they've got to be worthy of that gift that has been given to us, of disciples of a God-realized master. He came to bring us to God. At our New Year's retreat, I shared something that Jyotish said to me recently, which I found just very thought-provoking and inspiring. We were talking with a friend, and we were talking about Swami Kriyananda and the process of liberation and becoming a Jivan Mukta. And I said to this friend, and Jyotish was present there too, I said, I don't really think that I'll be liberated in this lifetime. And Jyotish said very quietly, you better expect it and then have plan B. And, it's such a wonderful thought because I just thought about it, and I thought, if you don't expect it, how will it ever come? And not to think I'm on level A or I'm on stage 7 and you have to get to stage 8. None of that. Forget it. Stop measuring. That's what I thought about. Don't measure. Just have the expectation. And if it doesn't happen, okay, have plan B. But have the expectation, not because we're special, but because Yogananda came for that purpose. And if we have faith in him, we can find that state where all the limited identifications, all the sorrows of the heart, all the pain, all the memories, all of that, it's just simply absorbed in the light of God. And I wanted to close just reading this beautiful passage from Master, from Conversations with Yogananda. This is how we should work with the Guru. If you go to a doctor and get a prescription from him, but after you return home and tear it up and toss it away, how will you expect to get well? The Guru is your spiritual doctor. It isn't sufficient merely to have a Guru. You must do what he tells you. If you follow his prescription even a little bit, your life will be transformed. Everyone who practices what he learns here will pass through the portals of death into the radiant kingdom of light. Don't expect to get there, however, if you merely depend passively on the guru, like a superstitious patient whom one may imagine framing his prescription and hanging it on the wall, as if expecting the writing itself to make him well. And don't think to get there merely by hanging on grimly to the end. Go on with steadfast faith, devotion, and joy. Long before you reach your divine goal, you will have realized how very sweet life can be when it is lived rightly. You will be glowing with inner radiance, vitality, and happiness. So not passively, not grimly, but joyfully, dynamically, with faith and devotion, using our discipleship to find the freedom that Yogananda came to give us all. God bless you.